He didn't flip the table. He didn't scream. He didn't even stand up. The entire great hall of the Vane estate was filled with the noise of 300 wolves eating, drinking, and laughing. But the moment Bryn's eyes drifted across the room and met his, the stranger in the velvet coat, the world stopped. She felt a hand grip her wrist. Hard. King Silas Vane, the man who owned her debt, her life and her fear, leaned into her ear. The room was silent, but his voice was a landslide. "Don't look at him again." That wasn't just a command. It was a warning, and she should have listened, because that stranger wasn't just a guest. He was the secret Silas had been killing to keep, and he was looking right back at her. The gravy boat was heavy cast iron, masked in silver plating, burning Bryn's wrist as she moved between the high-backed chairs. The winter solstice feast at the Vane estate wasn't a party. It was a political minefield disguised as a dinner. Her name was Bryn Harper. On paper, she was an Omega, the lowest rung of the ladder in the Silverpine pack. In reality, she was invisible. She was the girl who refilled the wine, who cleared the bone plates, and who tried desperately not to trip over the heavy velvet trains of the high-born ladies. But tonight, the air tasted like copper. At the head of the table sat King Silas Vane. If one had never seen Silas Vane in person, the tabloids didn't do him justice. They called him the Butcher of the North. But he didn't look like a butcher. He looked like a statue carved out of nightmares and marble. He was wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Bryn's entire life's earnings. His tie loosened his dark hair, falling over eyes that were the color of a bruised sky. He hadn't touched his food. He was watching the doors. Bryn moved to refill his goblet. Her hands were shaking. She hated being this close to him. Silas had a reputation for snapping servants' arms for spilling a drop, though she'd never actually seen him do it. He just radiated a heat, a dominant pressure that made her inner wolf whine and roll over in submission. "Easy, Harper," he murmured. She froze. He knew her name. He never used names. "My lord," she whispered, the wine bottle hovering over his crystal glass. "You're trembling," he said, not looking at her. His gaze was fixed on the entrance of the hall. "Stop it. It makes you smell like prey." She swallowed hard, forcing her pulse to slow. "Yes, Alpha." "Pour," he commanded. As the red liquid swirled into the glass, the heavy oak doors at the end of the hall groaned open. The chatter in the room didn't stop immediately, but it withered away table by table until the only sound was the crackle of the fireplace. A man walked in. He was the polar opposite of Silas. Where Silas was dark, brooding, and terrifyingly large, this newcomer was lean golden and smiling. He wore a suit of white silk, a bold choice for a feast involving bloody steaks. He walked with a casual grace, like he owned the floorboards he stepped on. "Duke Dominic Reed," a hushed whisper went through the serving line behind Bryn. Dominic Reed, the exile, the wolf who had challenged Silas 5 years ago and lost. Why was he here? As Dominic strode toward the head table, he didn't look at the king. He didn't look at the beta guards bristling with weapons. He stopped. He turned his head, and he looked directly at Bryn. It wasn't a glancing look. It was a collision. His eyes were a startling electric green. A slow, terrifying smile spread across his face, not of malice, but of recognition. It was as if he had found something he lost a long time ago. Bryn felt a strange pull in her chest, a tug like a fishhook snagging her heart. Her breath hitched. She couldn't look away. Who was he? Why did he look at a servant with such hunger? She took a step toward him unconsciously. Just an inch. Crack. The sound of crystal shattering snapped her back to reality. Silas Vane had crushed his wine glass in his bare hand. Red wine and blood dripped onto the white tablecloth, mixing in a dark pool. The hall went deathly silent. Silas didn't look at his bleeding hand. He turned his head slowly, predatorily, until he was looking right at Bryn. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the iris his face a mask of possessive, feral rage. He stood up, towering over her. The smell of ozone and rain, his scent exploded in the air, choking her. He leaned down his lips, brushing the shell of her ear, intimate and terrifying. "Don't," he growled. The sound vibrated through her bones, a low-frequency rumble that only a true alpha could make. "Look at him. Again." She stammered, terrified. Eyes on the floor. "Bryn!" He hissed, his hand shooting out to grip her chin, forcing her face toward the tablecloth. His thumb smeared a drop of his own blood onto her cheek. "You are mine to command. If you look at him again, I will tear his throat out in front of everyone." "Do you understand?" She nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "Yes, Alpha." "Good." He released her, then turned to the smiling Duke. "Dominic, you're late." Dominic laughed, but his eyes were still trying to find Bryn. "I got held up, Silas. Traffic and destiny." The rest of the feast was a blur of terror. Bryn was dismissed from the main hall immediately after the main course was served. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, yanked her into the kitchen, her face pale. "What did you do?" she hissed, shoving a dish rag into Bryn's hands. "The king is Britain. With rage, the baiters are doubling the guard." "I didn't do anything," Bryn cried, scrubbing a platter harder than necessary. I looked at the guest." "You don't look at Dominic Reed," Mrs. Gable said, crossing herself. "He's not just a duke, Bryn. He's a mentalist, a manipulator. They say he can drive a wolf insane just by holding eye contact." Bryn's blood ran cold. A mentalist. Is that why she felt that pull, that strange connection? She spent the next 3 hours hiding in the scullery, washing dishes until her hands were raw, waiting for the inevitable punishment. But no guards came to drag her to the dungeons. Instead, at midnight, the heavy door to the kitchen swung open. It was Silas. He had removed his jacket. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the top, revealing the dark ink of the tattoos on his chest. His hand was bandaged where the glass had cut him. The kitchen staff scrambled to bow, pressing their foreheads to the dirty floor. Bryn dropped to her knees, shaking. "Leave us," Silas commanded. The staff vanished like smoke. It was just her kneeling on the wet tile and the Lycan king leaning against the butcher block. "Get up, Bryn," he said. His voice was tired, stripped of the growl from earlier. She stood slowly, keeping her eyes on his polished shoes. "I am sorry, Alpha. I didn't know who he was." "Look at me." She lifted her eyes. He looked exhausted. There was a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Did he speak to you?" Silas asked, stepping closer. "In your head, did you hear a voice that wasn't yours?" "No, sir. He just smiled." Silas let out a dark laugh. "He smiled. Of course he did. He took a sip of whiskey, his eyes scanning her face as if searching for cracks. Dominic Reed is a collector, Bryn. He collects rare things, dangerous things. I'm just an Omega, sir. I'm not rare. Silas moved so fast she didn't see him move. Suddenly, he was in front of her, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. The touch was shocking. His hands were rough, calloused, but gentle. "Is that what you think?" he murmured. "You think I keep you in the scullery because you're worthless?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. I don't know why you keep me, sir. My parents died owing the pack debt. I'm just working it off." "You have no debt," Silas said softly. "I burned that ledger the day you turned 18. She stared at him, stunned. "What? Then why?" "Because the kitchen is the safest place in this castle," he said, his voice dropping to a rumble. "Because if the High Council knew what you were, they wouldn't let you scrub floors. They would hook you up to machines and drain you dry." She stepped back, hitting the sink behind her. "What are you talking about?" Silas slammed his hand against the counter next to her hip, boxing her in. "Dominic saw it tonight. I saw him see it. The glamour I paid the witches a fortune to place on you. It's fading." "Glamour?" She touched her face. "I don't understand." "You aren't an Omega, Bryn," Silas said, leaning down so their foreheads almost touched. "You are a chimera, a genetic anomaly. You carry the blood of 2 rival alpha lines and Dominic Reed. He's the only man alive who knows how to unlock that blood." He gripped her shoulders. "He didn't come here for the feast. He came for you." The kitchen door burst open. A beta guard, bloody and out of breath, stumbled in. "Alpha," the guard gasped. "The east wing. The perimeter is breached." Silas's eyes flashed gold. He looked at Bryn, his expression hardening. "Go to my chambers," he ordered her. "Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me, not even if they sound like me." "Silas." She started using his name for the first time. "Go," he roared. She ran. As she scrambled up the servants' stairs, she heard the howl. It wasn't the deep, thunderous howl of the vain pack. It was high, piercing, and mocking. It was Dominic, and he was already inside the walls. The corridor leading to the king's chambers was known as the Mile of Silence. Usually it was guarded by 2 elite sentries, but tonight the hallway was empty. The sconces on the walls flickered, casting long, dancing shadows against the tapestries, depicting the great war of the packs. Bryn's lungs burned. She could hear the sounds of fighting downstairs, the crash of furniture, the snarling of wolves shifting bone and fur. But up here, the silence was worse. She reached the landing, her hand outstretched toward the heavy oak door of Silas's room. "You run fast for a servant," a voice echoed. She skidded to a halt. The voice didn't come from behind her. It came from everywhere. It bounced off the stone walls, sliding into her ear canal like oil. She spun around. The hallway was empty. "Who's there?" she whispered, backing up until her spine hit the wood of Silas's door. "You know who I am, Bryn. Your soul knows." The air in front of her shimmered like heat rising off asphalt in the summer. Slowly the molecules knitted together, forming a shape. Dominic Reed materialized out of thin air, leaning casually against the wall 10 feet away. He wasn't out of breath. He wasn't bloody. He looked like he was still at the dinner party, holding a fresh glass of champagne. "Mental projection," she realized aloud, her voice trembling. Mrs. Gable had warned her. He wasn't really here. His body was somewhere else, safe. This was an illusion. Smart girl. Dominic smiled. It was a dazzling movie star smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Silas keeps you uneducated, but you have good instincts. Open the door, Bryn. Let's talk. I'm not opening anything for you, she said, gripping the handle behind her. It was locked. She fumbled in her apron pocket for the master key Silas had given the housekeeping staff, a breach of protocol, but one he insisted on. He lied to you, you know, Dominic said, conversationally inspecting his fingernails. About the debt. About your parents. She froze the key half inserted into the lock. You don't know anything about my parents. I know that your father was an alpha of the Crescent Moon Pack, and your mother, she was a rogue witch. That's a forbidden union, Bryn. An abomination to the council. Dominic took a step forward. Even though he was an illusion, her brain screamed at her to run. Silas didn't save you from debt. He hunted your father down. He killed him in the jagged pass of the Rockies. And he took you as a trophy. Liar, she screamed. Silas saved me. He burned the ledger. He burned the ledger, huh? Because there was no debt, Dominic countered, his voice dropping to a sympathetic coo. He keeps you close because he's waiting. Do you know what happens when a chimera reaches full maturity at 21? Her blood turns into liquid ambrosia. If an alpha drinks it, he becomes immortal. Her hand shook so hard, the keys jingled. She was 20 years old. Her birthday was in 2 weeks. He's fattening you up, little lamb, Dominic whispered. Open the door. Look on his desk. Look for the file marked Project Red. Then tell me who the villain is. A crash sounded from the stairwell. A massive black wolf, one of Silas's guards, came skidding around the corner, blood matting its fur. It saw Dominic and lunged. The wolf passed straight through Dominic's body like smoke. Dominic sighed. Rude. He flicked his wrist. The guard yelped mid-air, seizing up as if invisible wires were crushing his brain. The wolf slammed into the wall, whimpering, clawing at his own head. I can do that to you, Dominic said, his green eyes locking onto hers. Or I can set you free. Go inside, Bryn. Find the file. I'll be waiting. His form dissolved into mist. She turned the key through the door open and fell into the king's sanctuary, slamming the heavy deadbolt home behind her. The king's chambers were nothing like the rest of the cold stone estate. The room was massive, dominated by a 4-poster bed draped in dark furs. One wall was entirely glass, overlooking the snowy forest below. A fire roared in the hearth, making the room smell of wood smoke and the expensive cedar cologne Silas wore. It felt safe. It felt like him. But Dominic's words were like poison ivy in her brain. He killed your father. He's waiting to drink you dry. It's a lie, she whispered to the empty room. He's a manipulator. But her feet moved on their own. She walked past the bed to the heavy mahogany desk near the window. It was cluttered with maps, treaties, and land deeds. Silas was a messy worker. He did everything himself, trusting no one. Her eyes scanned the papers. Nothing. Just boring pack logistics. She opened the top drawer. Pencils. A dagger. She opened the bottom drawer. It was locked. She looked at the master key in her hand. It opened every door, but would it open this? Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. If she did this, she was betraying him. If Silas walked in, he would kill her, but she had to know. She inserted the key. It clicked. Inside, there was a single manila folder. It was old, the edges yellowed and curled. Written on the tab in Silas's sharp, angular handwriting were 2 words. Project Red. She pulled it out. Her fingers felt numb. She opened the folder. The first thing she saw was a photograph. It was grainy, taken from a distance. It showed a small cabin in the woods, engulfed in flames. The second photo was of a man. Her father. She barely remembered him, but she knew those eyes, they were hers. He was lying in the snow, his chest torn open by claws. She gasped, dropping the photo. The third document was a letter. It was on official council stationery, dated 12 years ago, to Enforcer Silas Vane target, Rogue Alpha Corbin Harper. Objective eliminate with extreme prejudice. Secure the child. The hybrid is a threat to the stability of the hierarchy. Signed, the High Council. Target, she whimpered. Eliminate. Silas hadn't just found her. He had been sent to kill her family. He was the enforcer, the council's hitman. She flipped to the last page. It was a handwritten note from Silas, dated just last week. Her power is spiking. The glamour is failing. I cannot hold it back much longer. If I don't perform the ritual by the solstice, the council will sense her. The ritual. Dominic was right. He was going to kill her. He was going to sacrifice her to keep his power or to hide his crime. All the kindness, the burning of the debt, the safe job in the kitchen, it was all just farming. He was raising cattle. She backed away from the desk, bile rising in her throat. She had to get out. She had to run. She looked at the window. They were on the 3rd floor. She could jump. Her wolf healing might save her from the broken legs. She scrambled onto the window seat, fumbling with the latch. Boom! The bedroom door exploded inward. Splinters of wood showered the room. She screamed, falling back onto the floor. Silas stumbled in. He looked horrific. His expensive suit was in shreds. Deep, gashing claw marks ran across his chest, oozing dark, almost black blood-poisoned blood. He was dragging his left leg. His face was pale sweat beading on his forehead. He slammed the ruined door shut with his shoulder and leaned against it, breathing like a dying engine. "Bryn," he rasped, his eyes finding her instantly. "Are you hurt?" He was dying, and he was asking if she was hurt. "Stay back," she shouted, grabbing a heavy brass candlestick from the mantel. "I know I saw the file, Silas. I know you killed him." Silas blinked, confusion clouding his pain-filled eyes. He looked at the desk, at the scattered photos. The realization hit him. He didn't deny it. He didn't shout. He just slid down the doorframe until he was sitting on the floor, leaving a streak of blood on the wood. "You weren't supposed to see that," he wheezed. "You killed my father," she sobbed, the candlestick shaking in her hand. "And now you're going to kill me. The ritual. I read it." Silas laughed, a wet hacking sound. He coughed and blood splattered his chin. "The ritual isn't to kill you, you stupid girl." He groaned, clutching his chest. "It's to hide you. To bind your scent to mine so the council can't find you. I killed your father. Yes, because he was rabid. He was going to kill you himself to stop the council from getting your power." He slumped sideways, his eyes rolling back in his head. "Silas." She lowered the candlestick. "Don't. Let Dominic inside," he whispered. And then the Lycan king, the butcher of the north passed out cold on his bedroom rug. The room was silent except for the crackling fire and Silas's ragged, shallow breathing. Bryn stood there for a full minute, frozen in the space between hate and panic. He was a monster. He admitted it. He killed her father. She should step over his body, run out the door, and find Dominic. Dominic wanted to help her. Did he? She looked at Silas's unconscious form. The poison from the claws, likely wolfsbane, mixed with mercury, was spreading. The veins in his neck were turning black. If she left him, he would be dead in an hour. If Silas died, the pack bond would break. The guards downstairs would fall into chaos. Dominic would waltz in and take her. And something about Dominic's smile. It felt cold, mechanical. Silas was a killer, but he was warm. He had bandaged her knee when she tripped on the stairs 3 years ago. He had fired a cook for yelling at her. Instinct. Her wolf instinct was scratching at the door of her mind. Save the alpha. Damn it, she hissed. She dropped the candlestick and fell to her knees beside him. She ripped his shirt open. The wounds were deep, 4 jagged tears across his pectorals. The flesh was bubbling. She needed silver. Silver slowed the healing, but it neutralized wolfsbane. She ran to the bathroom, grabbing his shaving kit. She found a silver razor blade. She grabbed a bottle of high-proof whiskey from the side table and a lighter from his pocket. "This is going to hurt," she told him, though he couldn't hear her. She poured the whiskey over the wounds. Silas's body jerked violently, a low growl rumbling in his throat, but he didn't wake. She held the silver blade in the candle flame until it glowed red. Then she pressed it into the black veins. The smell of burning flesh filled the room. She gagged but didn't stop. She worked for 20 minutes, cleaning, cauterizing, and binding his chest with strips of linen from his bedsheets. When she was done, her hands were covered in his blood. She sat back against the foot of the bed, exhausted. She watched him. An hour passed. The sun began to creep over the horizon, painting the snow outside in shades of pink and gold. Suddenly, Silas gasped. His eyes flew open. They weren't blue anymore. They were bright, glowing gold, the eyes of the wolf. He sat up, grabbing her wrist before she could move. His grip was like iron. "You stayed," he said, his voice rough. "I didn't want the carpet to get ruined," she snapped, trying to pull her hand away. He didn't let go. "You read the file?" "I did. And you saved me anyway." "I'm not my father," she said coldly. "I don't kill people." Silas pulled her closer. He looked at the bandages on his chest, then back at her. The aggression faded from his eyes, replaced by a terrifying intensity. "Your father lost his mind, Bryn. The chimera blood. It drives the host mad if it isn't anchored. He was going to kill you to save you from a life of being a lab rat. I killed him to stop him, and I promised him as he died that I would keep you hidden. By making me a servant, by making you nothing," Silas said fiercely. "If you are nobody, nobody looks at you, nobody hunts you, until tonight." He released her wrist and stood up. He wobbled slightly, but the alpha strength was returning fast. He walked to the window and looked out. "Dominic isn't alone," Silas said quietly. She stood up and joined him at the window. Her blood turned to ice. The forest edge was lined with black SUVs. Men in tactical gear were swarming the grounds. But they weren't Dominic's men. They wore grey uniforms with a red insignia on the shoulder, a scale holding a sword. "The High Council," she whispered. "Dominic called them," Silas said. He knew he couldn't beat me in a fair fight, so he tipped them off. He told them I was harboring a chimera. Silas turned to her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was heavy black iron, with the vain crest stamped into it. "We have to run," Silas said. "But once we leave this estate, you are no longer under my protection by law. Anyone can claim you." He took her hand and pressed the ring into her palm. "Unless you are my mate." The air left the room. "What?" "It's the only law the council respects." Silas said, his eyes searching hers. "If I claim you, if I mark you, you become queen of the Silver Pine Pack. They cannot touch you without declaring war on the entire North. You want me to marry you right now. I want you to let me bite you," Silas corrected. He stepped closer, tilting his head to expose his neck, offering himself to her, first a sign of ultimate trust. "A claiming bite. It binds our souls. If I die, you die. If you die, I go mad." The glass of the window pane cracked as a sniper bullet slammed into it, spiderwebbing the view of the army outside. "They are coming, Bryn," Silas growled. "Decide. Run as a fugitive and be hunted down by Dominic, or rule as my queen and fight by my side." She looked at the ring. She looked at the man who had terrified her for years. The man who killed her father. The man who had just offered her his throat. She heard boots thundering down the hallway. She looked up at him. "Do it," she whispered. Silas didn't hesitate. He grabbed her waist, pulled her flush against his hard body, and buried his face in the crook of her neck. Then his teeth sank in. The pain of the claiming bite was not a sharp, simple puncture. It was an excavation. When Silas's teeth broke the skin over the sensitive marking gland at the junction of her neck and shoulder, the sensation was so intense that her vision whited out. It felt as if he had poured molten lead directly into her veins, a scorching river of fire that raced instantly to her heart. Her back arched violently, a scream tearing from her throat, but the sound was swallowed by the sudden deafening roar inside her own skull. The wall between their minds didn't just crack, it disintegrated. She didn't just feel his teeth in her flesh. She felt him. She felt the jagged, cold terror he had been suppressing for 3 hours. She felt the 12 years of crushing guilt he had carried like a physical weight. The memory of her father's face in the snow, the promise he made to a dying man. She felt the agonizing hollow loneliness of sitting at the head of a banquet table, surrounded by 300 people who feared him, while his eyes tracked her across the room, terrified that one day she would look back and see the monster he believed himself to be. Mine, his mind roared into the void of her consciousness. It wasn't a word. It was a fundamental law of physics being rewritten. My breath, my blood, my anchor. "Silas," she gasped, her knees buckling under the sheer gravitational pull of the bond. He caught her before she hit the floor. He didn't pull away. He held her tight against his chest, his tongue lapping at the wound to seal the bond with his saliva, a primitive, intimate act that sent shivers rattling down her spine. But as the wound closed, the healing factor didn't stop. It accelerated. The dormant DNA in her cells, the chimera strain that had been suppressed by witches and glamour for 20 years, woke up. It was like a sleeping dragon opening its eyes in a dark cave. Her senses expanded violently. The smell of the room changed. She could smell the dust motes dancing in the shaft of morning light. She could smell the distinct acrid scent of the gun oil on the weapons 3 floors down. She could hear the tumblers of the electronic lock on the bedroom door, shifting the microscopic grind of metal on metal as a hacker tried to override the keypad. "They are here," Silas growled against her neck. He pulled back his hands, gripping her upper arms to steady her. His eyes were no longer the brooding blue of the storm. They were a luminous, terrifying gold. The bond was feeding energy back into him, flushing the grey pallor from his skin. The wolfsbane poison in his system was being incinerated by the sheer heat of their connection. "Can you stand?" he asked, his voice rough with the aftershocks of the marking. "I feel—" She looked down at her hands. The veins beneath her pale skin were pulsing with a faint, iridescent light, like oil on water. The fatigue was gone. The fear was gone. In its place was a humming vibration, a desire to hunt. "I feel like I could tear this entire building down brick by brick." "Don't tear the building down," Silas said, a grim, bloody smirk touching his lips. "Just the men trying to kill us." Boom! The world exploded. The heavy mahogany doors of the bedroom didn't just open. They were blown inward by a directional breaching charge. Splinters of wood the size of daggers showered the room. A flashbang grenade skittered across the Persian rug, detonating with a blinding white light and a sound that felt like a punch to the eardrum. Her ears rang with a high-pitched whine, but she didn't flinch. Her wolf didn't cower. Instead, a low, vibrating sound started in her chest, a growl that didn't belong to a normal wolf. It was deeper, filled with a chaotic static that sounded like a jaguar mixed with a thunderstorm. "Shield!" Silas roared. He tackled her, throwing his heavy body over hers behind the overturned wreckage of the massive oak desk. Thwip, thwip, thwip. 3 tranquilizer darts, thick as fingers, and filled with enough concentrated wolfsbane to kill an elephant, thudded into the wood, exactly where her head had been a second ago. "Surrender, Vane," a voice boomed from the smoke-filled doorway. It wasn't Dominic. It was the gravelly baritone of Commander Harrow, the head of the High Council's enforcement squad. "Hand over the abomination, and we will let you keep your title. Refuse, and we will liquidate the entire bloodline." "She has a name," Silas yelled back. He grabbed a heavy marble bust of Julius Caesar from the floor, an object that must have weighed 50 pounds. He stood up and hurled it with supernatural speed. It struck the lead soldier in the helmet with a sickening crunch, cracking the ballistic visor and sending the man flying backward into the hallway like a rag doll. "Kill the king," Harrow ordered, his voice cold and professional. "Secure the girl alive. The extraction team is inbound." Silas looked down at her. For a split second, the golden wolf disappeared, and he was just a man who loved her. "Stay down," he commanded. Then he leaped over the desk. Mid-air, his body contorted. Bones snapped and reshaped in a millisecond. The sound was wet and grotesque, but the result was magnificent. By the time his paws hit the carpet, he was no longer human. He was a massive midnight wolf, standing 5 feet at the shoulder, a creature of pure muscle and shadow. He crashed into the line of 6 soldiers who had stormed the room. It was a massacre. Silas was a blur of teeth and claws. He tore the assault rifle from one man's hands and snapped it in half with his jaws. He swiped his claws across another's chest, shredding the Kevlar vest like tissue paper. But there were too many of them, and they were prepared. "Nets!" a soldier screamed. 2 men fired pressurized cannons. Weighted nets made of silver-infused steel wire exploded outward, wrapping around Silas's hind legs and torso. The silver burned on contact, sizzling against his fur. Silas roared a sound of pure agony and rage, and thrashed, dragging the two soldiers across the floor. But a third man jammed an electric pike into his flank. Thousands of volts of electricity arced through the king's body. He convulsed his legs, giving out crashing to the floor with a heavy thud. Bryn watched from behind the desk, paralyzed, not by fear, but by the energy overloading her system. The chimera blood was reacting to the threat. It felt like she had swallowed a star. Her skin felt too tight. Her brain felt like it was expanding, processing 1,000 variables a second. "Help him," the voice in her head whispered. It wasn't Silas. It wasn't her inner wolf. It was something older. Something colder. She stood up. A soldier in the corner saw her. He raised his rifle, the laser sight painting a red dot on the center of her forehead. "Target acquired," he said into his comms. "I have the hybrid." She looked at him. She didn't run. She didn't shift. She simply pushed. She didn't use her hands. She shoved her will into the empty space between them. She visualized the synapses in his brain. She visualized the electrical signals, telling his finger to pull the trigger, and she crushed them. The soldier froze. His finger hovered over the trigger, trembling. His eyes went white behind his tactical goggles, panic flooding his scent, acrid and sour. He tried to fire, but his body refused to obey. "Drop it," she said. Her voice didn't sound like Bryn, the servant girl. It echoed, layered and distorted, sounding like three people speaking at once, a man, a woman, and a beast. It carried a frequency that vibrated the glass in the windows. The soldier's hands shook violently. He fought it, his veins bulging in his neck, but the alpha command in her voice, amplified by the chimera blood, was absolute. It bypassed his loyalty, his training, and his conscious mind. He dropped the rifle. It clattered to the floor. "Sleep," she commanded. His eyes rolled back in his head. He collapsed instantly, hitting the floor face first, unconscious. She stared at him, stunned. Her hands were shaking. Dominic Reed was a mentalist. He could suggest things, nudge people. But this was total domination. She had hijacked his nervous system. "Bryn." "Behind you." Silas's voice screamed in her head, panic cutting through his pain. She spun around. The shattered window, which opened to a 3-story drop, was no longer empty. A man had rappelled down from the roof, swinging silently into the room behind her. Dominic Reed landed lightly on the balls of his feet. He wasn't wearing tactical gear. He was wearing a pristine grey trench coat over a white suit, as if he were attending a gala. In his hand, he held a massive, silver-plated Desert Eagle pistol. He looked at her, and for the first time his charming smile was gone. He looked annoyed. "You're making a mess, darling," he said. He raised the gun. He didn't aim at her. He aimed at Silas, who was tangled in the net, pinned down by 3 men with shock batons. "No!" she screamed. She lunged, not at Dominic, but into the path of the bullet. Bang! The sound was thunderous in the enclosed space. The impact hit her in the left shoulder like a sledgehammer. It spun her around, lifting her feet off the ground. She slammed into the wall, sliding down to the floor, her vision going black for a second. "Bryn!" Silas's roar shattered the air. He went berserk, snapping the silver cables of the net with sheer brute force, ignoring the burning metal cutting into his skin. Dominic tutted, walking slowly toward her. He kept the gun trained on her head. Sloppy, he said, shaking his head. I was aiming for his heart to break the bond, but you make a convenient shield. A dead chimera is worth less than a live one, but the council will still pay for the corpse. The genetics are all in the marrow after all. She sat slumped against the wall, gasping. She waited for the cold spread of death. She waited for the silver poisoning to stop her heart. But the pain was fading. She looked down at her shoulder. The silk of her torn dress was soaked in blood. Yes. But the wound itself. It wasn't black. It wasn't festering. The silver bullet was being pushed out of her flesh. Clink. The flattened piece of metal fell onto the hardwood floor. Steam rose from the wound as the skin knitted together. Muscle reconnected. Skin sealed over. Within 5 seconds, there was nothing left but a faint silvery scar and a clean patch of new pink skin. Dominic stopped. He froze, staring at her shoulder. His green eyes widened in genuine confusion. That's impossible, he whispered. That was a pure silver hollow point. It should have liquefied your organs. She looked up at him. The adrenaline had burned away the shock. She didn't feel like a victim anymore. She felt like the predator Silas had always accused her of being. She smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was bloody wolfish and full of teeth. You really don't know what I am, do you? She whispered, her voice rising in that terrible harmonic distortion. She slowly stood up. The soldiers holding Silas had stopped shocking him, staring at her in horror. Silas had stopped struggling, watching her with a mixture of awe and terrifying pride. Silver burns wolves, she said, taking a step toward Dominic. But I'm not just a wolf, Dominic. I'm the monster the wolves tell stories about to scare their children. Dominic stepped back, his confidence fracturing. He raised the gun again, his hand trembling. Stay back. I'll put the next one in your brain. You can try, she challenged him. She didn't wait for him to shoot. Kneel. She threw the command at him like a physical weapon. It hit him in the chest. Dominic gasped, clutching his head. Blood starting to trickle from his nose as his mind tried to fight the order. But his knees hit the floor. She was the queen, and the reign of the Vane Pack was just beginning. Dominic frowned. What did you say? She didn't answer with words. She answered with the bond. Silas. Now. She didn't need to speak. Silas, pinned under 3 men, felt her surge of power. He knew she wasn't dying. He knew she was hunting. Silas exploded upwards, ignoring the electricity coursing through his body. He tore the throat out of the soldier on his left and backhanded the other into the wall. At the same moment, Bryn kicked Dominic's leg. She didn't just kick him. She put the force of a hydraulic press into her heel. His knee shattered backward with a sickening crunch. Dominic screamed, the gun firing wildly into the ceiling as he collapsed. She was on him in a heartbeat. She didn't shift. She didn't need to. She straddled his chest, grabbing his throat with her hand. She squeezed. You like to get into people's heads, she hissed, leaning close to his face. Get out of mine. She slammed a mental wall down on him. She pushed a spike of pure psychic static into his brain. Dominic's eyes rolled back, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth. He convulsed, then went limp. She hadn't killed him, but she had scrambled his mind. He wouldn't be manipulating anyone ever again. Bryn. Silas was there, pulling her off him. He was back in human form, naked from the waist up, covered in blood that wasn't his. He checked her shoulder. The bullet hole had already closed, leaving only a faint, silvery scar. "You healed," he breathed, looking at her, like she was a miracle. "Silver, it doesn't hurt you. It tickles," she said, adrenaline making her giddy. "Secure the room," a voice shouted from the hallway. More footsteps. The second wave. Silas grabbed a sword from the wall mount, an antique broadsword that she thought was decorative. He handed her the dagger from his desk. "There are too many of them," Silas said, his chest heaving. "We have to jump. The forest." "No," she said, gripping the dagger. She felt the ring he had given her burning cold against her palm. "We don't run. If we run, we are guilty. If we run, they hunt us forever." "Bryn, they are the council. They are the law." "I am the law now," she said. She walked to the shattered doorway. Silas tried to grab her. "Bryn, Thom," she stepped out into the hallway. The entire corridor was filled with enforcers, at least 20 of them. They raised their weapons. Commander Harrow stood at the back. "Fire!" Harrow shouted. "Submit!" she screamed. She didn't just scream it with her voice. She projected it with the full weight of the Alpha Chimera bloodline. It was a command that bypassed their ears and went straight to the primitive part of their brain stem that told them who was predator and who was prey. The air in the hallway rippled. The glass in the sconces shattered. Every single wolf in the hallway dropped to their knees. It wasn't a choice. Their bodies obeyed the biological imperative. Even Commander Harrow, a wolf who had ruled for decades, found his legs collapsing under him. He slammed his knees onto the carpet, wheezing, trying to fight the pressure crushing his chest. She walked down the hallway, her bare feet silent on the runner. She was covered in blood, her servant's dress torn, her hair wild. But she had never felt more elegant. She stopped in front of Harrow. He looked up at her, sweat pouring down his face, terror in his eyes. "You... what are you?" he gasped. "I am Bryn Vane," she said, her voice cold and steady. She held up her hand, showing the iron ring on her finger. "I am the mate of King Silas Vane, and by the ancient laws I am Queen of the North." Harrow looked at the ring. He looked at the bite mark on her neck, which was glowing faintly. "A chimera cannot be queen," he spat. "A chimera is just a wolf with 2 hearts," Silas said. He had stepped up beside her. He placed his hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding her. He looked at the kneeling soldiers. "And if anyone touches her, I will rip both of yours out." Silas looked at Harrow. "The mate bond is sealed, Harrow. If you kill her, you kill me. If you kill a king without a trial, you start a civil war that will burn the council to the ground. Is that what you want?" Harrow looked around. His men were incapacitated by her voice alone. Dominic, his inside man, was brain dead in the other room. He had lost. Slowly, Harrow lowered his head. He bared his neck, a sign of yielding. The council recognizes the union," Harrow ground out through gritted teeth. "We will withdraw." "Take your trash with you," she said, gesturing back to the room where Dominic lay. "And tell the council, if I see another enforcer on my land, I won't just use my voice next time." Harrow nodded stiffly. He signaled his men. Slowly, shakily, they stood up and retreated, dragging Dominic's body with them. We watched them leave. We listened until the sound of their SUVs faded down the mountain road. Only then did her knees give out. Silas caught her. He swept her up into his arms, carrying her back into the ruined bedroom. He kicked the door shut, or what was left of it, and sat on the edge of the bed, pulling her into his lap. The adrenaline crashed. She buried her face in his neck, smelling the cedar and rain shaking uncontrollably. "You were amazing," he whispered, stroking her hair. His hand was trembling too. "Terrifying, but amazing." "I was so scared," she admitted, clutching his shoulders. I thought I lost you." Silas pulled back to look at her. He used his thumb to wipe a smudge of soot from her cheek. "You can't lose me, Bryn. We're stuck now, for eternity." "You lied to me," she said softly. "For 3 years." "I did," he admitted. He didn't make excuses. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought if you hated me, if you feared me, you'd be safer. I was wrong." "Yes, you were," she said. She traced the scar on his lip. "You're an idiot." Silas chuckled, a genuine warm sound that rumbled against her chest. "I am. But I'm your idiot." He leaned in his forehead, resting against hers. "At the feast," he murmured, "when I told you not to look at him, it wasn't just because he was dangerous." "Why then?" "Because I was jealous," Silas whispered, his voice raw. "Because for 3 years I have watched you from the shadows. I have loved you in silence. And the thought of another man catching your eye, it broke me." Her heart stuttered. "You loved me, even when I was scrubbing floors. I loved you especially when you were scrubbing floors." He smiled. "You hum when you work. You sneak scraps to the stray cats by the back door. You are the only soft thing in this hard, cold castle." He kissed her then. It wasn't hungry or desperate like the bite. It was slow. It was a promise. "I'm sorry about the dress," he murmured against her lips. She looked down at her torn uniform. "I hated this dress anyway." "Good," Silas said, standing up and carrying her toward the bathroom. "Because tomorrow we're burning it. Tomorrow you wear velvet." She rested her head on his shoulder as the sun fully rose over the mountains, bathing the Vane estate in light. The nightmare was over. The secret was out. She wasn't the girl in the shadows anymore. She was the girl who brought the council to its knees. She was the queen, and she was never going to look away again. And that is the end of Don't Look at Him Again. Can we just talk about that moment in the hallway when Bryn used the alpha voice and forced the entire council to kneel? I literally got chills. It turns out Silas wasn't the villain, he was the protector all along. But now they have a target on their backs. Do you think the council will actually leave them alone? Or is this just the calm before the war? I hope you enjoyed this darker, grittier werewolf romance. Writing Bryn's transformation from a terrified servant to a badass queen was such a journey. If you want more stories like this, maybe a sequel about their reign, or a story about the witches mentioned in the file, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. It helps the channel so much. Leave a comment saying, "Long live the Queen," if you made it to the end. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.